Hi there, and welcome to the Systematic Review and Map Methods course. In this session, we're going to run through how we assemble a library of our search results, remove duplicates, and use review management software to manage the process of a review. So there are some things that you want to do after you've conducted your searches, but before you screen your search results. And it normally relates to how you have assembled your search result files. So we've conducted our searches across a number of different databases, and in some of those databases, we've had to export multiple different chunks of search results because they'll only let us export, for example, 500 search results in Web of Science. So we have a big mess of files, and what we want is one list of unique records that we can then start screening. If we try and do it with multiple files, if we try and do it with lots of duplicates there, we'll end up wasting quite a lot of time. So what we're doing is reassembling results from big databases, collating results across databases, removing the obvious duplicates which are identical within and across databases, identifying partial duplicates and removing them, and this happens, as we'll see in the next few slides, where you have slight differences, perhaps there's a typo or a space in the wrong place. And we want to identify those partial duplicates and remove them. Really importantly, we want to record all of our activities and the number of results and the number of duplicates removed so that we can track back what happened, what we found in each database and what happened when we combined those database search results together. So record keeping is really important at this step. And we want to prepare the unique set of records for screening, as I said. And this whole process is what we call assembling a library of evidence. So often our search results will end up in the tens of thousands, sometimes 20, 30, 40,000 search results. And across CE reviews published between 2012 and 2017, we found that on average there were 23,000 search results in systematic reviews and maps, but this ranged from 370 in a very small review up to 145,000 in a really, really big systematic map. But sometimes there are very high rates of duplication, depending on the number of databases searched and the type of search that's being performed. You might have a very high rate of duplication. So what we need to do is to keep track of all of those duplicates and all of the search results. And as I said before, this full documentation is really important. And this is so that we can retain that really important central tenet of transparency, which allows repeatability and verifiability as well. Another issue of managing search results is we often want to share the workload. We might want to share searching or duplicate removal, and we'll almost certainly want to share screening to some degree across a team. And so having the platform, perhaps software, that allows us to do this easily is a really, really important and useful consideration. So here we need to have careful planning and control. Just think in advance a little bit about what system you want to use and how you're going to use it so that you don't end up making mistakes, losing information, or having to repeat things. So when we want to remove duplicates, it's useful to know that across these systematic reviews that were published by CE between 2012 and 2017, we had an average duplication rate of 35%. But that ranged from 2% in a review that only searched a small number of databases up to 79% in a review that searched a really large number of databases. So the duplication rate depends slightly on the number of databases you search. The more databases you search, perhaps the less unique information you bring back in, although some of those extra databases will be particularly unique, and that's why we add them. But you can imagine an accumulation curve that as you add more databases, you get less unique hits of some sort. And that means that the duplication rate on average might be expected to be around 35%, but it could vary. And as I said, we need to remove these before screening so that we don't end up reading the same abstract multiple times. You can do this automatically fairly easily with complete duplicates. There's a tool under the Data tab in Excel, for example, that allows you to remove identical values But the fact that different databases index citations in different ways, sometimes by a human, sometimes by a computer, often from very different sources. One might be from citation information within another article. Another database might include records from table of contents that are submitted by the journal. And this all means that punctuation differences, typos, spelling mistakes, even just spaces or commas in the wrong place somewhere in the citation can mean it's very difficult to find a complete duplicate. But there are facilities within what we call review management software or reference management software that allow us to do this fairly well based on some kind of fuzzy matching. So it looks for the percentage overlap between two different records and gives you an indication of whether it's a likely duplicate or not. And it's totally okay to combine these different approaches to do, for example, what we do in some reviews is to do the quick and dirty, very clear duplicate removal in EndNote, and then transfer the search results to EpiReviewer, for example, and use their fuzzy matching. If we put everything in EpiReviewer straight away, and we had a very large number of duplicates, we'd have to manually go through all of those potential duplicates in EpiReviewer, which would take a very long time. And so that's why it's good to just easily remove the complete duplicates in a different platform first. You do have to be careful not to only look at titles when we're thinking about duplicates. And that's because it's very common for people to use identical titles, particularly where they're short titles, and yet then be completely different articles written by different people. So just be aware of that. There are other fields like the authors, the years, the volume numbers that you can use to have a little bit more power in when you're identifying duplicates or not. So some of the software that we can think about using when we are planning our review are simple spreadsheets, reference management software, and review management software. I'm going to run through each of those in turn. So Excel or spreadsheet software like Google Sheets has a number of benefits. It's easy to access and use. Most people have this software. If they don't, it's free to get access to things like Google Sheets or OpenOffice. You can work offline in these platforms, so you don't need to be connected to the internet to use them necessarily. People are very familiar with them as well in general, so it's easy to assign work to people and not have to have a steep learning curve with a new software. Related to that, it's very easy to share these. You can attach them to an email, you can put them on a shared cloud storage, and as I said before, it's easy to remove identical duplicates in these. Some of the downsides, though, are that as anyone who knows and has used Excel in a large team, version control can be a particular challenge. If people happen to open a file independently and work on it separately, often, unless you're working online, for example in Google Sheets, you might end up with multiple versions. And consolidating those is quite difficult, particularly with complex databases like lists of citations. It's also very easy to accidentally damage a library. If you forget that you've got a screen open and you have your cursor over a cell in a spreadsheet, you can accidentally erase information very easily. It's also very easy to misalign cells. So if you accidentally remove some cells and shift some cells up, you would misalign the data, and the data in one row might not all be from the same citation. It's also difficult to identify partial duplicates in some of these spreadsheet softwares because that's not what they're intended to do. This is a screenshot of a review that could be run. It's a hypothetical review, but this would be perhaps what you'd be looking at if you're screening in Excel, for example, or a spreadsheet. So each line here is an article. We can see in column B, we have the titles. And then in column C, we have an include or exclude decision where the reviewer has to put in their response. And the same for the abstract. As we'll see in the next session, for abstract screening, we want to also be potentially want to be including a reason. So it's not just yes or no, but we might, especially when we're in the trial and planning stages, we might want to just keep track of why we think it's not relevant. So you would want to build that in as well. And you can see it's quite messy. It's not very user-friendly. So perhaps you might want to not think about using spreadsheets. The second piece of software that many people will still be familiar with is reference management software. So for people who write research articles, often we'll cite as we write, or we'll include citations in our articles using some software like EndNote or Mendeley or Zotero. And the advantages of these platforms are that they're designed for citations, unlike spreadsheets. So they're designed to hold bibliographic information. It's generally pretty easy to import and export citations, which is not quite the case with spreadsheets. It's also pretty easy to identify partial duplicates in some of these softwares, unlike spreadsheets. And you can also, in many of them, work offline, and I think in all of them you can then sync to a cloud version of your library. And some of them in that way allow working as a team. Some of the downsides are that these tools can often be pretty expensive, although some of them, like Zotero, is free. They might be less familiar, so you might have someone in your team who hasn't used one of these platforms before. They are sometimes quite challenging to share, although shareability in these platforms has improved considerably recently. But then syncing can be a problem. So if your library hasn't synced and you screen records and someone else is doing the same thing, you can get conflict, and that can be a problem. They're also not designed for rapid screening. So it's not quite so easy to look at an abstract or a full text and just click include. Often you have to move something to a group, which might involve dragging and dropping or clicking multiple boxes. And sometimes it is quite easy to damage a library. I spent about 4 hours once screening in EndNote and it crashed. And it was only then that I realized that, at the time at least, EndNote only saved the location of citations within different groups on successful closing of the library. And so because the library crashed, I lost about 4 hours of filtering and putting citations in different groups. So just be aware of that. This is EndNote Online, which is a free online version of EndNote. I'm using it in a current review, which is the screenshot here. I find it pretty useful for title screening, where you can see my cursor there, I can click the boxes of the articles that I think are clearly irrelevant at title and drop them into add to group, drop them into the exclude group. So I can screen titles pretty swiftly. And you can do the same thing by selecting multiple records within reference management software. And as we'll see with review management software, title level screening isn't so easy. It's mainly built for abstract and full text screening. So if you think that you're going to be throwing out a lot of titles at title level screening, this review, for example, has about a 6% inclusion rate. We have a very inefficient string that's necessarily inefficient. If that's the case, then you really might want to be doing title level in a platform where you can see a whole list of titles and go through them quite quickly without having to read the abstracts or scroll past the abstracts first. But EndNote accepts various different file formats. You can put search results in from a number of different databases, and you have groups here. You can sync it with several different computers, so you can work as a team as well. So EndNote Web, I think, is quite a useful tool for screening at title level, at least. But then the next type of platform is review management software. And these tools have been specifically designed for systematic reviews. Some examples are EpiReviewer, Cochrane RevMan, Ryan, Covidence, Kadima. There are a number of them available, sometimes, unfortunately, a confusing number. These, I said, have been specifically designed for reviews. They're designed for rapid screening, so they're designed for screening abstracts and clicking include, and then it proceeds to the next one. And you see it very easily. You don't have to mess around trying to get your screen set up every time that you read an abstract. They're also designed for sharing, so it's typically very easy to share workload across people. And if you're going to be doing consistency checking, where you're checking the consistency of your screening, your eligibility assessment across multiple people, these review management tools are specifically designed to allow that, to have a testing phase first. We'll come on to that when we get into the screening session next. They also generally allow for full documentation of review activities. So every time you import a new set of search results to EpiReviewer, for example, you can describe the date of the search string that was used, the database, and so you can keep records as you go. Those records are held centrally, and you don't need to keep it on in a notebook or in an Excel file, for example. It's also typically very difficult to damage these libraries. It's not like an Excel file or a reference management library where it's held on your laptop. It's kind of in the cloud typically, and if you want to delete something, you have to go through several processes to really confirm that you want to delete it, because it's designed around good record keeping. Some of the downsides are that these tools sometimes are quite expensive. There are some free alternatives, like Kadima, and Ryan is free at the moment. There's another one called Colander and another one called Sysrev. So some of them are free, but with all of them, they're typically not very familiar to it, particularly a novice team. So unless you have experienced systematic reviewers, there will be a learning curve. And chances are people who've done a systematic review on your team previously, if you're lucky to have one, might not have used the tool that you're familiar with. So just be aware of that there might be a learning curve. Some of these tools are easier to master than others, but then that's also because they might perhaps be a little bit more basic. So if you want to have a tool that does a lot, then you might need to have a bit of a learning curve. One of the downsides of most of these tools is that they only work online. They're cloud-based or web-based. So if you want to go and work in your cabin in the woods and you don't have internet access, many of these won't work. There are some exceptions, I think. Ryan, I think, might allow an offline version now, and Kadima, I know, are working on that process. But build that into your decision process when you're thinking about which tool to go for. This is just a screenshot of a review that's set up in Sysrev, which is a fairly new tool. And this is the kind of interface you would have in any review management software. It's based around reading the title and the abstracts, sometimes other citation information. And it also gives you the opportunity to just click very quickly yes or no. And then you can proceed to the next record. This is the abstract screening phase, but if you had a PDF, you can see upload PDF there. Once we've decided which abstracts we want to include, we would then need to put the PDFs on. So you can host your PDFs online and share them across a group and screen the PDF within these platforms as well, so you don't actually have to download and read the PDF separately. So these are specifically designed for abstract and full text screening. But as I said before, they're not so great if you want to screen your titles and if you have a lot of titles that you're throwing out because you had a very sensitive search but not a very specific one. So some of the features that might be worth thinking about in more detail are that some within the reference management facilities, some allow you to do a search. So for example, EpiReviewer and Sysrev allow you to search PubMed. This is almost always restricted to the open access databases because you need to log in to be able to search something that your institution subscribes to. They all allow you to import references. They typically all allow you to store PDFs or doc files of the full texts. And as I said before, they allow manual and automatic removal of duplicates. They also have this study classification and data extraction capability, which is important for multi-user sharing across a team. So you can code studies, you can give studies a categorical scoring based on the information they have. That might be include or exclude, but it might be a description of the study belonging to a certain category. They typically allow you to do consistency checking. As I said, we'll come on to that in the next session, but in essence, it allows you to understand the level of agreement or disagreement between different reviewers. Some tools also allow you to do text mining or automatic text clustering. And these evidence synthesis technologies are becoming more and more popular, so they're becoming more common in these review management tools, which is another benefit of these tools over reference management software. Some also allow you to do advanced synthesis, so you can do meta-analysis within EpiReviewer, for example. Some of them also allow you to do inductive or line-by-line coding, which is a qualitative research method where you extract themes from your studies by highlighting passages of text. And that ability to interact with text and quotations within PDFs is very valuable for qualitative research, but also if you're extracting descriptive metadata about your study. And then overall review management aspects are important as well, like allocating specific tasks to different people, getting progress reports on how your colleagues are doing, so you can chase them up if they're too slow. You can export decisions based on coding and data about your review, and some of them also allow you to produce flowcharts for your review, like the Prisma or ROSES flowchart, automatically based on information it knows about how your review is progressing. So just to summarize, we've hopefully seen that in the process of assembling our search results and producing a library ready for screening, we really need to be transparent and repeatable because it's a very messy, complex process with lots of different moving parts. Hopefully I've also highlighted how important review management software can be and how useful it is to have dedicated review management software, either instead of or in combination with some of these other tools like spreadsheets and reference management software. Hopefully I've also shown the different options available. We've talked a bit about how easy to use some of these tools are, that spreadsheets are easier but then less functional, and review management software is more functional but less easy to use perhaps. There's issues of price and accessibility and collaboration that you'll need to think about as well. There are resources out there that help to summarize what tools are around. One is the Systematic Review Toolbox, and you can go and check out that link in the useful links at the bottom of this course. And that holds a whole range of tools that are related to systematic reviews in some way. There's also a systematic review of review management tools that was published in Environmental Evidence in 2008, and that's on your recommended reading, or your essential reading. So take some time to read those resources. This landscape is changing quite quickly because it's technology and people are rapidly embracing systematic reviews as a really useful method. So try to get a grasp of what might be the best tool for you. But if in doubt, always try and reach out to an expert or someone who's done systematic reviews before to see what they really liked as a tool and get some advice from them.